In Charleston, South Carolina, the historic Emmanuel AME Church will hold Sunday service tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. One victim, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, his death is especially painful for a man who was his very close friend and a man who was his political advisor. In addition to serving as a minister, Pinckney was the youngest person ever elected to the South Carolina legislature. Let's talk about him, his life, his legacy, with his good friend, Jason Johnson, who's also a political science professor at Hiram College. Thank you for being with me.
Glad to be here, Poppy. Thank you.
What do you remember most about him?
I remember a lot of the things that he taught me. I remember he had this huge, booming, smiley, pearly white teeth laugh whenever I said something ridiculous that showed that I was from the city and didn't really understand the South. Clem was a man who had a tremendous amount of love in his heart for his community. He was sophisticated, he was dedicated, he was both a political and a spiritual warrior, and his loss, it goes beyond just being painful to me and painful to his family. It is a loss for the entire state of South Carolina.
There's one story that you talk about. You wrote this sort of beautiful memory of him down, and you say when he was running for office, you were running his campaign, you said, look, we really got to get out there. We really got to raise more money. And he looked at the average income in his community. It was something like $14,000, and he didn't want to ask him for money. Yeah.
He was like, look, I know people will give to me, and then they won't make rent. I know people will give to me, and then they won't get food. And so he just wanted more volunteers. I mean, you never forget the first campaign that you run, and you can never forget working with somebody like Clem Pinckney. I've worked with a lot of Republicans and Democrats and other campaigns. He's one of the best men I've ever met in my life.
Huh. What did he want to do most for the people he represented, both in the faith community and his constituents as a member of the legislature?
He wanted to show all the young men and women from his community that they could do it, and that they could do it in South Carolina. A lot of people from the Low Country, certainly with Clem's level of skill and everything else like that, they're out of there. They leave South Carolina. They go to New York. They go to Atlanta. But he wanted to dedicate his life there. And he wasn't looking at the next political move. He wasn't looking at the next jump. Last time we talked was a couple years ago, and he wasn't talking about, well, what I'm going to do after I leave the state Senate. He wanted to be dedicated to that community.
You wrote that you fear that there will not be enough discussion about how this attack was, quote, a deeply personal and explicitly political attack on black lives and black power. Talk to me about that.
Well, I look at a lot of the candidates that we've been hearing from over the last couple of days, and it's horrible. It's offensive. This young man specifically said he was out to kill black people, that blacks are taking over, that he had to do something about that he wanted to start a race war. And yet you've got candidates like Jeb Bush and Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee saying, well, we don't know what this is about, or we think this is an attack on faith. Look, if you can be mad that President Obama didn't say terrorism about Benghazi, then we can be mad at candidates who refuse to call this terrorism or a white supremacist attack.
So what would Reverend Clementa Pinckney want to happen in his legacy?
I got to be honest, I don't think I'd be fit to speak for the words that he could produce, but I'll tell you this, he would want to see people keep working. He would be happy to see that the church is still open on Sunday. He would want people to stay dedicated to that community. He would want people to recognize that there is a place between being hurt and pained and still having collective political and spiritual action. And I think that's one of the most tremendous legacies that he'll leave that hopefully the rest of the country will become familiar with.
What a remarkable man he was, and all of those 9 victims were. Jason Johnson, thanks for telling us a little bit more about your friend, sharing some of those stories with us.
Thanks so much, Poppy.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thanks.